In the winter of 1872, a small mining town in Montana found itself at the center of a story that history books rarely mention. Snow buried the wooden roofs, and the wind carried the echoes of men who once dreamed of overnight fortunes. Among those men was Elias Turner, a quiet prospector whose journey would soon reveal one of America's forgotten tragedies. Elias had come west with nothing but a worn pickaxe and a belief that the frontier offered second chances. The town of Ridgetop Creek survived on hope more than gold, yet each sunrise saw miners descend into the frozen earth. That year, a mysterious collapse in the old Willow Ridge mine began a chain of events that would reshape the community. When the ground tremored on a January afternoon, the townspeople thought it was another blast gone wrong. But Elias, who had worked in the deeper shafts, recognized the sound of shifting supports. He rushed toward the mine entrance, shouting warnings as dust clouds rolled across the valley like ash from a dying fire. Inside the mine, 32 men were working under dim lanterns that flickered with every vibration. Without warning, the eastern tunnel caved inward, trapping a dozen workers behind walls of shattered timber and rock. The town froze in shock as word spread, and wives ran barefoot through the snow, calling out the names of their loved ones. Elias was among the first to volunteer for rescue. He knew the inner tunnels better than most and understood that every minute lost meant another life slipping away. With only ropes, hand tools, and kerosene lamps, the rescuers descended into the trembling darkness, where silence felt heavier than the earth itself. As they dug through the debris, the rescuers heard faint tapping, an old code miners used when words could not reach. Elias pressed his ear to the rock and whispered back the same pattern, signaling that help was coming. The townspeople gathered at the entrance, praying with clasped hands as the storm intensified overhead. Hours turned into a night filled with exhaustion, sweat, and cuts that stung beneath freezing air. The deeper they pushed, the more unstable the supports became. Every creak threatened another collapse, yet Elias refused to retreat. He believed a man's worth was measured by the lives he tried to save, not the gold he failed to find. By dawn, the rescuers reached the first pocket of survivors. 4 men, bruised but breathing, were hauled out on makeshift stretchers. The crowd wept at the sight. Though relief was brief, 8 were still missing. Elias wiped soot from his face and pushed back into the mine, ignoring pleas for him to rest. Further inside, the air thickened with dust, forcing the men to ration their lanterns. Elias guided them through side tunnels he had memorized, though the map in his mind was shaped long before the recent collapse altered the structure. Each step felt like trespassing in a place where time itself had paused. They reached a narrow passage where the timbers had splintered into twisted shapes. Beyond it, faint voices echoed like distant waves. Elias shouted encouragement, promising the survivors that daylight still waited for them. The men trapped inside responded with shaky breaths, their hope tied to the rescuers' fading strength. Working in tight quarters, the rescuers chipped away at the stone 1 inch at a time. Elias noticed a draft of air, meaning they were close to a small vent cavity. With renewed urgency, they widened the gap enough to pass a lantern through. The survivors' faces, illuminated by the flickering glow, were pale with fear and relief. But danger was far from over. The deeper sections of the mine groaned with pressure, threatening to seal the trapped men forever. Elias knew they needed to extract them quickly, yet carefully. He ordered the rescuers to alternate between digging and reinforcing, creating a narrow escape tunnel that snaked toward the survivors. Above ground, families huddled around fires as the second night approached. Children cried into their mothers' shawls, and old men murmured prayers they had not spoken in years. The mine had become more than a workplace, it was the heartbeat of the town, and every life inside felt tied to the fate of all. Inside, Elias crawled through the newly carved tunnel, his lantern brushing against jagged rocks. He reached the survivors, offering water from a dented flask. Their hands shook as they drank, whispering that they had nearly lost hope. Elias promised they would not die in darkness, even as he worried about the collapsing supports behind him. To lead them out, Elias tied ropes around their waists and signaled the rescuers to pull slowly. Each man squeezed through the narrow gap, coughing as air from the outer tunnels reached them. The rescue was painfully slow, but one by one, they emerged into safer territory, greeted by trembling hands and whispered, "Thanks." Just when the town began to believe all men would be saved, a thunderous crack shook the tunnels. Elias realized the central support beam was giving way. He pushed the last survivor forward and shouted for everyone to run. Dust filled the passage like a suffocating wave, swallowing the lantern light behind him. The rescuers sprinted toward the entrance with the survivors, stumbling through falling debris. But Elias remained behind for a moment longer, checking for any remaining signs of life. Finding none, he began his retreat, though the collapsing ceiling clawed at his back like a closing jaw. At the mouth of the mine, the townspeople watched in horror as another section caved in. They screamed for Elias, though his figure was nowhere in sight. Snowflakes mingled with dust in the air, blurring the boundary between earth and sky as the mountain swallowed the last open passage. When silence finally settled, the rescuers regrouped, taking count of the men they had saved. 12 emerged alive, more than anyone had dared hope. But Elias was not among them. His absence felt like a wound carved into the town itself, an unspoken truth too heavy for words. The next morning, a small team returned to search for Elias, though everyone knew the risks. The mine was unstable, its interior reshaped beyond recognition. Still, they ventured inside, guided by faith more than logic. Deep within the collapse, they found his lantern, still faintly glowing. Nearby lay Elias, pinned beneath a fallen beam, his posture peaceful as though he had simply decided to rest. A thin smile remained on his lips, and his hands were clasped together, as if praying that the others had made it out. The rescuers lowered their heads, understanding the price of every life he saved. They carried him out into the morning sun, where the town gathered in solemn silence. Mothers pressed their children close, and men removed their hats in respect. Elias Turner, the quiet prospector who once sought only a second chance, had given his life so others could claim theirs. A simple wooden cross was placed on a hill overlooking Ridgetop Creek. It bore no elaborate inscription, only his name and the date of the collapse. Yet people traveled from distant settlements to stand before it, drawn by the story of a man who embodied the spirit of sacrifice that shaped the American frontier. The surviving miners spoke of Elias for years, telling how he had crawled through darkness and fear without hesitation. His courage became a legend whispered along campfires and in taverns where travelers paused to hear tales of the West. He became proof that America's history was not built solely on battles or politics, but on everyday heroes. As time passed, the mine was sealed forever, left as a silent monument to the lives nearly lost within it. Children playing near the old entrance would ask their parents about the wooden boards marking the collapse. They were told of the man who refused to leave anyone behind, even when the earth trembled under his feet. Elias's story spread beyond Montana, reaching newspapers that described him as a symbol of frontier bravery. His name appeared alongside sheriffs, soldiers, and trailblazers who shaped the nation. Yet those who knew him insisted he never sought glory, he simply answered the call of humanity when others hesitated. Years later, when the town prospered with new industries, they built a small statue in his honor, a miner holding a lantern high, illuminating the path ahead. It served as a reminder that courage often shines brightest in the darkest tunnels, both literal and within the human spirit. Visitors came to Ridgetop Creek to learn about the incident, leaving flowers at the base of the statue. They spoke softly, almost reverently, as though afraid to disturb the lingering echoes of that terrible day. The town embraced the memory, ensuring that Elias Turner would never fade into forgotten history. Generations grew up hearing the tale, understanding that heroes are not defined by wealth or fame but by the choices they make when everything trembles around them. Parents told their children that Elias taught America a lesson. Sometimes the bravest people are those who carry no weapon, only a lantern and a promise. And so the story of the 1872 Ridgetop Mine rescue lives on, woven into the tapestry of American history. It stands as a testament to sacrifice, unity, and the silent strength found in ordinary individuals. In the end, Elias Turner did not seek to be remembered, yet his light continues to guide those who believe humanity is worth